Alright, so in the interest of complete disclosure, I'm fully willing to admit that I forgot to record the conversation with Gerd just before this level. But she just told us to go to the desert and kill a sandworm, which sounds completely awesome. We get to fight a giant sandworm, and it is exactly what you think it would be. Full-on, Dune-style, 200-foot-long sandworm type thing. Unfortunately, the fight really isn't too great, but we're going to be carrying a decent number of weapon cards to deal with it, so that's really part of the thing. I think our entire deck right now, save for the Mandragores, is comprised of weapon cards, and in my opinion they are far and away the best type of card in the game. But the Grump Desert is filled with earth and, I'm still not sure what to call it. Plant? Leaf? We'll call it leaf for now. Leaf elemental creatures, or just grass. Grass works too, grass elemental creatures. And pretty much nothing else. So if you bring along fire and water cards, you'll be doing fine. Though admittedly, you know, if you start to bring some water cards just to deal with the... Oh no wait, not fire and water cards. You want to bring fire and grass cards. If you bring water cards, you're going to be in a disadvantage versus the area boss, which is really a significant issue. So we find a red fairy that tells us there's a fabulous treasure, and we find two oases, with switches next to them, so I'm sure they're unrelated. And of course the giant roiling pile of sand in the distance there is in fact the sandworm. Now the sandworm is a fairly difficult boss fight, and yeah, we're fighting the boss right now. Fuck it. We get to go straight to the end of the level, just like that. The sandworm has a ranged attack, it has a wide sweeping attack that can strike 360 degrees, it can spray sand at you, and it's basically run from battle, hasn't it? Yep, okay, there we go. So, the sandworm is one of the few enemies, and actually I think the only enemy that can oh no wait, there is one other, regrettably. But the sandworm is one of the few enemies that can escape from battle. What happens is the sandworm runs whenever it loses 50 HP or more, so 200 to 250 there. It'll disappear, and then it'll appear at a next set point on the map with 200 HP. So even if you deal more than the set amount of damage, it doesn't actively carry over, it just spawns a sandworm with less than max health at a different location. So, of course, what would the desert be without mummies? So we find a couple free ones of those. And what would the desert be without carbuncles? I'm pretty sure a carbuncle is a real thing, and I'm absolutely certain that's not what it looks like. But this is the carbuncle! The carbuncle is a card we've sort of seen before, but we haven't really used. It will roll into a ball like a really aggressive armadillo and just kind of charge at you. It doesn't deal much damage, and it can't actually strike you for a decent portion of the end of its roll, which is pretty weird in my opinion. Its roll actually only strikes you if it hits you in the middle of it. If it's like unrolling animation, it doesn't actually hit you at all, so that's fairly... It's really kind of an ineffective monster. I mean, it's a decent card, but a pretty ineffective monster. We also get to meet the Scythe Lizard, which we could have had one of by this point, but Scythe Lizard cards are fairly worthless since they're fairly weak. As are the Scythe Lizards themselves. As you can see, he just did 6 damage to me there, but they are the 1000 EXP upgrade for the Lizard Man, so if you really want one prior to this, you can get it, or if you want to capture a few, you can get them here. Scythe Lizards are notable for being a ranged card with a melee strike attached to it. What happens is they swing their tail, their scythe tail, and then that fires a shot outwards. So we find another oasis, and well, the first 2 switches were at oasis. I've run out of ideas. And of course the third switch is going to be as well, but it has been surrounded by a cactus in the years since its implementation into this weird, convoluted desert lock mechanism. So you need to break apart the cactus in combat to be able to get to the switch. There are 2 switches like this in the desert, and if you hit both of them, I mean, that's fairly alright. If you're really losing a lot of health on the boss fight, which is possible, the sandworm can be a bit tricky to learn the attack patterns of, there is a free fairy card for you right there if you absolutely need some mid-battle healing, but I prefer to keep our deck more aggressively focused on the opponent. So, we meet the second form of the sandworm, and luckily I have another Mandragora to spare. That's one of the sandworm's attacks. We're probably going to see all of them barely before the sandworm gets destroyed for the final time. But for now, we're just going to be dealing pretty significant damage with a Mandragora whenever he appears. One base Mandragora tossed near him can actually take him out, since unless you toss it right in front of him, the Sandworm's turn speed, combined with its slow attack speed, will not allow it to hit the Mandragora before it goes off. So just toss a Mandragora behind it, instant end of phase. It's perfect, it works. And then we find a single red fairy who's telling us more about the desert at hand. And we have another fight with the Sandworm, but we're going to ignore that for a moment because we've found the 4th oasis. And this is probably what I'd describe as the main puzzle to the area, is finding these oases and then promptly pressing the switches at them. So the little guy is saying that sandworms will keep running, but eventually even sandworms have a breaking point, and if you hit it, they'll just stand their ground and fight you. So in case you didn't have enough mummy cards by this point with all the free ones they're handing out, you can actually catch them here too. Mummies have 34 HP and very high stagger points, so it's actually possible to double hit them with cards like the Cockatrice that are normally limited by the invincibility frames of the enemy. And of course the Banshee's just great all around for taking out any enemy, Scythe Beast included. Actually, it's perfect for taking out the Scythe Beast because it does just about the exact damage you need to be able to kill one. Anyway, we finally reach the last switch, we press it, and what happens? Well, nothing visible immediately, but something's going to happen. The one kind of problem is that it doesn't give you any indication that something's happened, like they did back in... was it Blissoon? It was Blissoon, wasn't it? With the water wheel that you turn to actually get the Maelstrom card in the fountain. But still, if you go over here, you'll see there are 4 triangular indentations in the ground, and a hole in the wall. If you haven't pressed the switches, those triangular indentations remain up and the door remains closed. But it's actually a door. How incompetent must adventurers in previous years have been to not put together that the legendary secret treasure is hidden behind the door. Anyway, so you get another carbuncle. If you didn't get the one back in Blissoon, this will help complete your collection. And you get the rare card, the Crystal Rose. This is the treasure of the desert that they're mentioning. Crystal Roses are alright cards, but they're decent money sinks since they actually have... or they're decent money sources since they're actually worth 700 gold per Crystal Rose, which is pretty good for a monster that is an actual regular encounter later in the game. So once more we get to fight the Sandworm. It's at 150 HP, so we're in its second to last phase here. There's one other attack it has, it'll just spit some sand at you. If you do have a Cockatrice and you manage to get to an area where you won't be hit, you can use it and 3-hit the boss with it, which will immediately take it out without overusing a card. But chances are if you're using a Cockatrice, due to its slower cast speed, the boss is going to be able to hit you with something unless you're like directly behind it when you use that. So here we find the final area. Spoiler, it's the final area. And of course we have the Sandworm right in the background there, but we don't want to fight it yet. No sir, no way, no how. We have something important to find first. Something that we can't find anywhere else, and it's not the cards in this chest. Oh, and if you wanted Scythe Beast, there they are. So, after a quick abort and jump back into the level, we wander over here to find a very special monster, and a very irritating one to fight. This is the Trickster. The Trickster is only found in this level, to my knowledge. And it cannot ever be gotten any other way by either capturing or transforming. The Trickster is never available, or it might actually be available in the shop, but this is easier. But I don't believe it is, and the Trickster is just a bit, well, tricky to get, so it's generally fairly handy to just keep it around. So I definitely want to capture this here, and I don't want to kill it, so I'm going to use the Lizardman card since it's actually weak against the Trickster, so naturally it's going to be taking less damage from the Lizardman, allowing me to get it to lower health so I can start just spamming cards at it to capture it. And then, once we've captured it, we get to see the wonderful design. I don't get what it's supposed to be either. In any case, but this creature wanders around, does backflips, and then throws sound waves that can inflict any of the sticks. Well, I guess it could inflict death over a while, but any of the 6 status conditions that are in the game. And naturally, some things are more helpful than others, poison, charm, paralysis, things like that, but I'm not going to diss the others. And now we have finally reached the sandworm's breaking point, the point at which it's just reached its wit's end. It's completely done with our bullshit, and it is going to fight us to the death. Well, that isn't a very good move for it, because I could have immediately killed it with a Mandragora there, but I decided to hold off. I stuck the Mandragora back in the sand a little bit, just so it didn't get in range of the sandworm. Instead, I'm going to use the Banshee, because Banshees are helpful cards. I love getting more of them, and if you can kill a boss with a Banshee, it gets an absurd amount of experience, 900 in this case. But as soon as you kill the sandworm, the level ends, so be sure that everything you want to do is done before that point. And granted, I didn't do too well on this level. The entire place is just a bit irritating as a whole. But I did manage to get the sandworm cards, so we're good there. I don't even need to worry about getting the full 3 cards if I can manage to get the boss card anyway. So, the sandworm is a summon type creature that will appear and then spin around, damaging enemies that are standing around you. It's actually a pretty good summon card, since it does multi-hit if the enemy has a high stagger range. And if they don't have a high stagger range, they get knocked the fuck back. It is pretty ridiculous just how much knockback this thing has. So, we want to put it into our deck somewhere. I'm just not quite sure where. We also did get a Sand Beetle card in that previous level that I don't think I was ever able to show. The Sand Beetle is an independent type creature that is very fast and burrows under the ground. It can only be hit when it surfaces to attack, both as a summon card and as an opponent. So trying to catch the Sandworm can be a bit tricky at times, but it is a pretty good independent card. Its only letdown is its HP. It is very fragile, and in a game where HP corresponds to how much time you can spend on the field, you're not going to be seeing much use out of the beetle before it has to go away. Alright, so naturally we get to talk to Gerd once more, but no more side quests for the time being. That is it. But maybe she got some new stock? Oh yeah, there we go. She's got those red lizards from before, but now she has a couple of extra cards that we haven't seen before. An archer tree, a wizard, and she actually sells the sand golems. If you missed it in stage 1, here's your chance, folks. So I'm going to buy a couple of Wraith cards, because I thought at the time they were fairly helpful. They can transform into Banshees, but what I should have probably realized at the time was that Banshees themselves are an easier means of getting more Banshees. So I could transform it. It can transform into a red lizard or a wraith with 1000 EXP, or it does have a 3000 EXP upgrade. I could transform a cockatrice into a griffin, which is the earth elemental equivalent of the bee. And I should probably talk about that at the moment. For every element in the game, there is a card that buffs that element and weakens the element that's weak to it. So a card will buff water cards and make fire enemies half as powerful, things like that. And the thing is, I don't like them much. Probably the only time I ever use one of those cards is when I'm trying to speedrun the game, and in that case they actually work out fairly well in a full Dragon Knight deck. So, we don't have quite enough EXP to transform the Venom Lizard, but we're getting there, and we do want to get there, especially with the Venom Lizard. But we do have enough EXP to duplicate the Banshee, so, what the hell, might as well, right? But with that, that's pretty much it. We could buy more cards, we could sell more cards, but we don't need to right now, and none of them are going in our deck anyway, so off to the next level as soon as we edit this stuff in. First off, we can always get rid of a couple of lizard men for a Banshee or something like that. Lizard men are expendable as much as I don't like to admit it. So, I bought multiple Wraiths, but I'm actually only going to put one in the deck. Oh, wait, I am putting more than one? I guess I am putting more than one in the deck. I don't know if I agree with past me's decision. But we also get to look at the Crystal Rose that we got. The Crystal Rose is a weapon type card that has a woman in the center of the rose. I didn't notice that until just now. That's really weird looking. I'll probably have it as the thumbnail for this episode, so hopefully you'll be able to see what I see. But, oh no, I guess the Sandworm would be the thumbnail for this one, wouldn't it? But in any case, we've got our deck pretty well worked out. We're going to head over to Alexander to talk to him about fairies. And actually, to take a quick note of something that he's actually got here, if you look over to the left, there's a fat little fairy sitting over there. Look at it. We only got 3 fairies in, so he doesn't give us anything else. But that little fat fairy is actually 10 fairies conglomerated into one. Whenever you gather 10 fairies, to save on having to render a bunch of sprites in the same room at once, because they do actually render the fairies flying around, they just make one really big fairy for every 10. It's like a tally mark, essentially, for your fairies. So anyway, next time we must deal with the undead in the burial grounds. But until then, thanks for watching. This has been PA. I'll see you in the next episode of Lost Kingdoms.